So the clutch on this particular Honda Shadow is operated, or is a hydraulic clutch. So there's a master reservoir here, and that feeds the hydraulic fluid down through a pipe that feeds down to a slave cylinder here, which acts on a push rod, which acts on the clutch. So this is actually, the slave cylinder is leaking oil, or is leaking fluid, hydraulic fluid, and what I need to do is remove the slave cylinder, and I bought this slave cylinder rebuild kit, which has a number of seals and a new spring. I'm going to rebuild the slave cylinder. So I just need to remove this cover, which is held on with this bolt, and this bolt also holds on, is one of the 3 bolts that holds on the slave cylinder. So I'll just remove the bolts. It's the bolts cover. Now, what I need to do, this is the line from the master cylinder here, which feeds into, so this is the slave cylinder here, and this is the line that feeds into the slave cylinder from the master cylinder here. So I need to, this is a little banjo bolt, so I need to break open this banjo bolt. It has 2 crush washers on either side of it. And there's going to be clutch fluid pouring out, so I need to collect that fluid and make sure it doesn't get everywhere. So the slave cylinder is actually going to be full of fluid. It's going to be a little reservoir, semi-reservoir of clutch fluid as well. So I need some paper and cloths. Motorcycle, because this fluid will eat through the paint very quickly. Okay. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to break the lock on this bolt. So I'm just going to push it down. It's just to break the lock. Okay. And I'm just going to lightly close it because I don't want brake fluid getting everywhere. Okay. This bolt will be hard to break open if you take this slave cylinder off first. So once that bolt, the lock in that bolt is broken, it'll be easier to open later on. Okay, don't want fluid dripping out, which it started. Okay, okay, there's 2 more bolts here, and there's one here, which is holding a little bracket. I need to open up that bracket first. So this slave cylinder is leaking fluid at the back of it. So we'll probably see some brake fluid pouring out at some stage. Probably not that much, hopefully. So I need to note that this white lead here sits in here snugly. When I'm putting it back in, so I can remove that bracket. That's the way the bracket goes. Just put that little bolt with it. There's my longer bolt which goes in the front. Okay, so just remove this. This is actually a little rod. The push rod is at the back. I don't want that coming out. So that's the little push rod here that the slave cylinder acts on. So basically when you pull the lever here, it pushes the fluid into the slave cylinder, which acts on a piston which pushes on this little push rod, and the push rod can be removed, but there should be no need to remove that. It acts on the clutch, actually on the far side of the motorcycle. So I actually cleaned this out. I can see I cleaned this out last year, but there is some brake fluid here. And there is some brake fluid because this is leaking. Okay, so I need to get my little container. I want to catch any brake fluid that leaks out. And I open up this. This is just a little rubber gasket, plastic gasket here. That just goes on here basically. Okay, so I'm just going to unscrew this little bolt. So again, I have already broken this, so it should be easy enough. There's brake fluid pouring out, as expected. Unscrew this banjo bolt. Catch that little washer. Just going to put that here for a second. Okay, so that's going to drip down from the master cylinder, so you'll probably find that your master cylinder is empty after a while. I can leave that there to collect that fluid. Use my little banjo bolt. It's a little washer. Let's go back here. So here is my slave cylinder. As you can see, there is actually some oil leaking out here. And this is the piston that acts on the push rod. So this is what I need to rebuild. So I'm just going to force the oil out as much as I can. I can do that by pressing on the piston here. So this is the slave cylinder when it's off the motorcycle. This is the outside. These are the 3 holes here that secure the slave cylinder to the engine of the motorcycle via the 3 bolts. Here is the banjo bolt where the oil feeds in from the master cylinder. So it feeds in through this banjo bolt. You can see that there's a little hole in the banjo bolt. So it's a little hollow bolt. I'll just take it off and show you. So it has 2 little crush washers on it as well to provide an oil seal. So you can see it's a hollow little bolt, and it has the oil goes in through here and it flows in through the middle of it into the slave cylinder. And when the oil is forced in there from the master cylinder, it acts on this piston. So this piston, I can move it in and out. I can just move it out like that. So it has a little spring on the back of it. So that's the piston. And the piston has two seals, two oil seals. It has an oil seal on the middle and an oil seal on the outside that stop the oil pushing past the piston and instead cause the piston to move outwards. And the piston acts on the little push rod, and that acts on the clutch. So it has a little bleed nipple up here at the top as well. This is for when you want to bleed it, let air out of bleed air out of the slave cylinder or the clutch system. You just open up this little hollow bleed nipple and it lets the air out. So we'll show that in later. So for the moment I need to get this piston out and I need to replace these two oil seals. So this is the kit that comes. This is a slave cylinder rebuild kit. Okay, it comes with two oil seals, a new spring and a little cap for the bleed nipple. So I also need two new copper washers. So these are new crush washers that will go on the banjo bolts. I could just take off the old ones. You can reuse them if you want, but I'll just put new ones on. So they just check them for that they're the right size. So that's the right size. And I'll keep them on this, keep them with this banjo bolt so they don't get lost. Okay, there we go. So there's my two crush washers, so I'll leave that to the side for the moment. I'll just put it in my little magnetic tray. There's the two old washers. They're actually aluminium washers, so I think you can use aluminium or copper. Aluminium is softer than the copper washers, so I'll put them to the side as well. The tools I'm going to need are just a little air pump. It's just for pumping up tires. If you have a compressor, that's better. I need a little 8mm spanner. And I have just a plain bolt that's the same size as the banjo bolt, and I'm going to use that to extract the piston. So first up, to get the piston out, I'm going to pump in air through this little bleed nipple. So I'm just going to open up ever so slightly. Just want to have it barely open so that air can push in through it. And I'm going to close up this opening for the banjo bolt with a closed bolt. Okay, so I don't even have to tighten it, I just barely have it screwed in, and that just stops the air expanding out through this opening here. So the air will be forced in through here, and hopefully this piston will be pushed out. The other thing I'm going to need is I have some brake fluid that this came out of the clutch line, the slave cylinder, when I was taking it off the motorcycle. So I'm going to reuse that with the new seals. So let's get it out. There we go. It's not a good connection, but that's all I have. There we go. Okay, let's see, can we get that out? There we go. So there's the inside of the slave cylinder. That needs to be cleaned out. I'll use some engine degreaser and some cotton buds to clean that out. This is the piston. So you need to note the order in which the spring is installed. So the wide end is to the back. This is the front. And you need to note how the seal. So this is the oil seal that has to be replaced. So this is leaking. So let's just get something here and get a little flat screwdriver. I should be able to remove that. Okay, try it this way. Okay, that works better. Okay. Damn it. Okay. So you can see the seal is coming off there. Let's push it down. And there we go. That is the oil seal off. So I need to note that there's a little trough in the old oil seal, and the trough goes to the rear. Okay, so that's the oil seal. I'll just bring it in a little bit closer. It's full of dirt. It's actually a little bit of corrosion, rust I think, and grit, and that just ruins the seal. And on the other side, this is what faces into the engine. It's just flat on this side. Okay, so we need to note that order when we're putting that back in. So take away our pump. You take out this center seal. Spring off. It just sits on a little seat in the middle. It could possibly be reused, but I'll replace it because it comes with the kit. Okay, I'm going to get a little pick to remove this. So it's just a little pick, should help. It's actually disintegrating this. Okay, that's it out. Okay, so I just need to now clean up the surface here, clean up this this piston, so it's perfectly clean. I'll use engine degreaser, should do the job, and some rags and maybe some steel wool. Apart from that, it's not too bad. A little bit of steel wool here, which I'm going to use. clean it up. Okay. Just check for any little bits of gunk in the corners. That looks pretty good. Some in this side here, some corrosion. Okay, let's give it a spray with engine and parts degreaser again. Okay, now I need to clean the inside of the piston. So I'll just have to spray it inside. Okay, and I use my steel wool to clean the surface, the mating surface for the oil seal. Just one last cleaning so you can see inside it's nice and clean inside. Feel it. Yeah, it's nice and smooth, no edges. So let's just blast it one more time. So it's nice and clean. This is nice and clean. Okay, so now I can apply the seals, new seals. Already. So I can just fit that in here. So don't need to put oil on this one because it's this is not actually an oil seal. This is just to keep the push rod centered properly. Okay, so once it's in, it should be just flush with the surface, and then that's fine. So that's in. Okay, next up we need to put the new oil seal back on the piston. To do that, I'm just going to soak it in some brake oil first of all. So I have some that came out of the clutch system when I removed it. So I'm just going to dip it in it, soak it in it. Get it out. Okay. Okay, so again the lip goes to the back. So this is the front, this is the rear. Okay, so it's going to be a tight fit. Actually going to dip this in oil as well. Just to make sure it's nice and lubricated. Okay. Try from this side. It's going to be really tight. I'm going to have to work it right around. Okay, there we go. All good. It's nice and flush up against the front of the piston. There's no kinks in it. Okay, happy with that. I'm going to dip it in oil again. And then it's going to go back into the nice and lubricated. Don't use any other lubricant. Okay. With the seal on, I need to put it back into the piston. First of all, I need to put on the new spring. So that has a little seat that it slots onto. So I need to make sure that that's seated properly. Screwdriver just to make sure it's nicely seated. Okay, that's on. Okay. So now I'm just going to dip this in brake fluid again, just to make sure it's nice and lubricated. Okay, that's okay, that's what I want. And I just want to lubricate inside the piston, in here, brake fluid. Let's go ahead and install our piston. So it has the lip of the seal, it's going to catch, so we need to push that in. So I'll put a tiny little bit of pressure on it. piston is on. So you can see spring is working as it should. And our seal should be working as well. Okay. Right. Next up, I want to take some Plymouth tape. I'm going to use it on the thread of the bleed nipple, and that's to make sure that when I'm bleeding it, that air is not getting past the threads when it's loosened. So just wrap it around the thread. That should be enough. I want to make sure that it's not covering up the little hole. So just pull that up, past that, make sure the hole is clear. Okay, so the little hole in the bleed nipple goes in here. Just going to thread it in. Replace the bleed nipple if it's corroded or the thread or anything is damaged. So this is all good. I'm not going to do it in the whole way. I don't need to because I'm going to be bleeding it. And then I just take my banjo bolt. Actually, I wanted to put this little cap on the bleed nipple as well. Sorry, wrong way. That's my cap. I'll just put it on for a moment, make sure no dirt gets in. That came with the kit. Just be careful, this will pop out when you turn it upside down, so just be careful. Copper washer. This will, the fitting, the lead from the master cylinder fits on here. Then you put on your second copper washer, like so, and then screw it into the, on top of the terminal from the, or the terminal from the lead from the master cylinder. So it sits between the two copper washers to provide they provide the oil seal, because it's a soft metal which crushes, and just make sure it means that you shouldn't have any oil leaking out. And then I just put it back in here, screw it back up loosely. I will then stick this back in the engine, put the 3 bolts back on, or at least 2 of them, and I will then tighten this, torque this to spec. You should check that in your user manual, or in the service manual, or the Haynes manual. Torque this bolt to spec, and then we're going to start bleeding the system to, as we add oil back into the clutch system. So I'm just going to do that now. Just take the copper washer and the banjo bolts, run it through. Take the next copper washer, put it on, loosely screw it in, clean. I cleaned this last year, so usually it will be absolutely manky, so you might need to clean that. This is not a, it's just a bit plastic gasket, so it doesn't do a whole lot. So just match it up, just turn it right.
I don't know!
Okay, that's where it goes.
What size? It's a big size of the mountain. It isn't one like. There was a mountain on top with like that. I'll go with you. I will go to that building. No, it's good. Good. No. Say that stop. I said stop. Yes, why not yes? What was the game's called? Blue. Who's messed up with that car? What was it?
Just loosely.
That's awesome.
Secure this. Loosely. I'm just going to put this on for use.
Why are you looking? If I do this, let me put it here.
Okay. This is a top that up, please.
Jaden. Boy.
Bleed system. Quick feed. There's no air in that pipe now. It's nice and clear. Just make sure this is nice and tight. Okay, to the side. Get this excess oil in off. Just in case. Right, next we need to put this cover back on. So we need to undo this bolts here.
You've done something bad to your spell. What did I do? What did I do?
Put it on. And that's bolts. These 3 bolts need to be tightened to torque. So, but again, they're screwed into aluminium, so not too tight. If they're not tightened properly, they're too loose. When you put pressure on the clutch lever here, it'll push on the piston, but the piston will act on the push rod and it'll push the slave cylinder away from the engine, and then it won't work. So these bolts need to be tightened properly. Hand height should be enough. And there's good pressure on that clutch, feels perfect. I'm going to take out some of the excess oil, put the lid back on, and my clutch is sorted. You can just see some air bubbles coming up here. And the handle is stiffening all the time.
Oh my god, you got so much. They probably don't cost you. They both do. They're obviously
Feels really good there now. Much better than it had been before. I'll just work more of that oil out though, or more of that air out.